All right, so we're back for part 2, and this time, I believe where we left off, we want to dive into the allegations, the custody battle.
Yeah.
Transition into the ayahuasca experience that was very recent.
Oh, yeah.
That left me crying with my daughter on the couch for 10 minutes.
Man.
And
I mean, it's a rough one because I think this resides in everybody. And I will start this off with, and this is where I will get emotional because I have watched more brothers and sisters going through this. And the number one thing that I have seen in divorces is that people allow their emotions to control their actions and they lose sight of the path in which they're supposed to go, which is the children.
Yeah.
Like, I understand it didn't work out with you two, but you now have to think about the kids' emotional state. And the only people that lose in a divorce are the kids.
Yep.
You're winning because you two just can't figure it out and get along with each other.
Yeah.
You know, you two, because it takes two to tango,
Of course.
failed.
Yeah.
That or failing.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that's not to say that you can't get back together, whatever, you know, but sometimes you just got to throw your hands up and go, okay, Roger, this is not happening.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is also, I think we need to bring up that that's okay because sometimes it's actually better and it's
100%.
good. And I know one of the big things for me, so the not good enough bug is the thing that fucking's always on my shoulder, right? That's the demon that's always on my shoulder. Everything not good enough, not good enough, not good enough.
Right.
And so when a marriage ends, it's like, well, you weren't good enough, right? That creeps in. And so it's not always true.
Yeah. It's definitely not that you weren't good enough. It may be the fact that you weren't good enough then.
That's such a good point.
You weren't good enough then. Like for me, I can honestly say in my second marriage, I was not good enough then.
Well, I wasn't either. My first.
Yeah. I mean, well, my first is very clear. It was that. I mean, there was definitely two parties and we're going to get in that in a minute. But I mean, my second wife, like I cannot begin to talk. I don't know him. Like obviously clearly she knows him, but that dude is so chill.
Yeah.
He is like I've watched him work with, interact with my son and my daughter and the way and he's younger. So she married up, she got a younger dude, she's almost the same age as me. I don't know how many years younger he is. I always tease her about robbing the cradle, but I can't really talk too much shit because my wife is, I robbed the cradle with my wife, so I was like, I upgraded and she upgraded. So it all worked out,
Nothing wrong, little upgrade.
But, and it's all fun and games, but he's such a good stepfather and such a good dad. And I cannot be, oh my God, I cannot, I get emotional about this guy. Yeah. And I sound like a little girl when I talk about this stuff because my prayer was, let her find a man that will treat her right in front of my son and be better than me.
Yeah.
And she did.
Good.
100%. And my hat's off to you, buddy. I'll keep his name because he's still active duty and he's hard working for our country right now. But, and for me, that's just a realization that I wasn't good enough then because I allowed external circumstances, my first marriage, to destroy myself, then in turn destroyed my marriage because I could not compartmentalize because I was allowing those things that were going on in my custody battle. Because once I was divorced, we married, the custody battle didn't end. And that was draining us. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars that was being sunk into this. And then it got to a point where I didn't have the money. Then I had to, start, doing court battles on my own and representing myself. I had one attorney, that man was a godsend. I'm still friends with him to this day, who did stuff for me pro bono for so long. And he did a phenomenal job, but that's not realistic. You're not going to find that.
Right.
And so for me, at one point she was like, let it go. And I wouldn't let it go when I probably should have. But
wife number 2 is telling you to let it go.
Correct. And because it was creating such an unhealthy circumstance of not only for her, but for family and my son. And my argument to her was, well, what kind of man am I showing my kids if I quit? And it's not that I'm quitting. Yeah. It's that I have to think about not to use a military term in regards to my family, but the greater part of my family nucleus of my unit.
Yeah.
I understand that, but she's also making poor decisions herself and not putting the children first by allowing two kids and coercing their opinions. And we'll dive into that now, because what happened was I had the world's greatest job. Thought I had made it. And everything was going good. And I was on my first date with my second wife. It was October. And I got a phone call, and they said, "Need you to come in." And I was literally in a movie with her. I left the movie theater for like 30, 45 minutes. And she was like, she always laughs. She's like, "I should have freaking ran then." I was like, man, the only reason I'm thankful that she didn't was because of my son. I feel like I would have made her life a lot easier if I had not that she was a bad person, but I was not where I should have been. And our marriage actually wasn't bad. Yeah. Like, what made it bad was all the drama. And so I came in front of my chain of command, and they said, "Hey, you got some allegations, and you're being served papers, and you've got to go to the courthouse right now." I went, "What?" And they said, "You have been accused of," I think it was like a Chapter 31 injunction, which was basically raping and molesting my daughters. And I was like, "What?" Had no clue. And all these allegations came out about me, like tying up my daughter, throwing her in a pool in front of my girlfriend, who was my roommate's wife. That my daughters were 2 and 3 at the time. And we were actually in the pool with my 3 and 4-year-old, and we were like kind of like tossing her back and forth.
Of course,
and that was like
do normally with children in the pool.
And then she basically said a bunch of stuff. Well, we'll leave that to that.
Sure.
And that was it. That was the end of my career. That was the end of my life for the next 5 to 6 years.
No innocent until proven guilty on that one.
There was none. It was, you are guilty. And to some extent, I agree and understand that, because there are those situations. But through the process, it was determined that she had been coercing my daughters into saying these things. As a matter of fact, in one of the investigations on the, it reads in the paperwork, it said, my daughter walked up and said, "I can't remember what my mom told me to tell you." And it was like, boom. And that was it. And then, and then over the course of many years, every single time, I had to do the whole supervised visitation, which was humiliating. I had people locally that were hearing her stories, and she was going out and telling all these people about all this abuse she endured from me, which I was never around. I was active duty and I was gone. And I was literally volunteering for schools and deployments just to get away from her and be a piece of crap, and any excuse for me to cheat, any excuse. I mean, again, like I said, she knew about the cheating. I admitted it to her, because at a certain point in that, I remember waking up and we were in a hotel room, and again, alcohol was involved, hence why I don't drink anymore. As of ayahuasca.
I was just going to say, as of 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, not even 2 weeks ago, this past weekend, actually. Yeah. So I literally was like looking in the mirror, and I was like, I freaking hate myself. I'm a piece of trash. I didn't like who I looked at. Everything I was doing was a lie. I lied nonstop, which when she goes, "He's a liar," and she said that in court, she wasn't lying that I wasn't a liar. I was lying about stuff, but did I ever do the things that she said I did? Absolutely not. Right. And she even told me on occasion, she's like, "I'm going to ruin your life because you ruined mine." And, in the state of Florida, this is why I think family law needs to change. But I also understand, and I found out in my county, there was like 300 backlogged cases for the exact same thing. I mean, the exact same thing that I was going through. Much worse. Mothers that were literally abusing their children sexually, and fathers, and then blaming it on boyfriends and doing things of this stuff. This is stuff that I actually had to sit down with the investigator. I'm actually shaking right now because it was horrible. And I think it was man, it was total at the end of the case. It was 16 false allegations total. Went into court all the time. Always was unfounded, obviously, because it didn't happen. But I remember on the second to third last allegation, this investigator, she was really fed up with it all. She says, "Byron, you want to get this thing knocked out of the park?" Because they knew I wasn't doing anything. I mean, we're talking my wife at the time was, and this will really give you guys context. And when she hears this, she's probably going to get pretty emotional because it was really, really hard. But DCF showed up at my front door with like black lights. They were looking at all of our sheets, looking through the kids' stuff, and they were in my home, invading my privacy. They were pulling me out at the time. I was a commercial underwater welder because that's essentially the only job I could get because, it just was. My clearance was flagged, so I couldn't get a government position. I had all this ongoing. And, I lost my train of thought there. Sorry. But right. It was so emotionally overwhelming. And the investigator was sitting there. She goes, "Take a voluntary polygraph. Will you do that?" I said, "Name the time and place. Let's go." She was like, "Tomorrow. Can you do tomorrow?" And I said, "Can you get me in today?" She goes, "I can't." And she didn't tell me why. And I said, "But I can get you in first thing tomorrow morning." Man, I got in the car, drove down to the police station, took this polygraph, and finished. And she looked at me very investigator like. She said, "How do you think you did?" And I was like, I was in tears. I actually had to almost had to stop it because I was shaking as the questions they were asking me. And I was like, I passed. I know I passed. I didn't do this. And, that was the end of it. She goes, "Yeah, you did. You passed it." She goes, "It's on a scale of a -10 to a positive 10. And she says, "The only person that ever scores a positive 10 is Jesus himself." Is literally what she said to me. And then, how do you think she did? And she failed it miserably, -9. And
hell in the coffin. Right.
And then of course we go to court and the judge, of course it's not municipal in court because it's a polygraph. That's going
to be my next question that I asked you.
But a judge can't unsee what a judge sees.
Right.
So with all the threatening voicemails that she was leaving me and all the threats and the horrible things, and he looked at her and was like, "You must be really proud of yourself." And then seeing that, it was like, the immediate was like, he took drugs. He was on drugs, and he was like, and one of the things I learned in the military was she's like, he's special forces training, and he's this, he's that, he's trained to fail these polygraphs. And I was like, "You've got to be kidding." One of her expert witnesses came in.
It's not a movie. It's not John Wick.
It's not. I don't have a tack in my foot. Because what happens in a polygraph is that it's only going to show inconclusive. So it's going to show that you were doing something to try to. It's not going to say you
answer the question false.
Right.
Yeah. It's just going to show you were trying to not. Yeah.
Right. It's just going to show a spike. And it's like, oh, this guy's trying to do something, and everything was pretty baseline. And I also took a urinalysis too before I did it. So everything came back clean. Everything was gravy. But she failed. And so then the question was like, well, then why did you fail?
Yeah, of course.
And of course that never happened. Of course they wanted it all thrown out because, all the hard questions were coming down the pipe. But it was one of the most darkest times of my life because she was going around telling everybody in town, and it was, oh God, it was horrible. I had people spit on me.
It's a small town too.
Yeah. I had people spitting on me. I had friends that were longtime friends that were no longer my friends. She at one point accused, at the time was one of my best friends. And I was staying with him because, like I said, I was, I did not want to lose my BAH. So I couldn't stay, in government housing, because they would take away the BAH and take that away from her. So I became homeless. That's how I became homeless, is that I couldn't do it. And they weren't willing to support me. And so ultimately, like I said, I was homeless. And then she started accusing me of sleeping with my best friend's wife, and which was completely false and untrue. the man that he was my best friend. That would have never happened. That never happened. I mean, granted, I understand why she was thinking that way because I've been cheating on her. And of course, nothing that came out of my mouth. And ladies and gentlemen, once that trust has been violated, it's over. I mean, you're not convincing a true believer. It's not happening. Yeah. You're not going to go, it's just like Taliban and ISIS. You're not going to go out there and convince them that their cause is
immoral and wrong.
Right. Yeah. They're a true believer in that. Now, it's the same thing. I'm not saying that my first ex-wife is ISIS or whatever, but what she did was pretty horrible. I don't know. Her feelings were definitely not on speaking terms. I've forgiven her, but I believe the story, and I tell this story not to trash her, but so that the men out there.
Well, when you hear 300 other cases, that's 300 other people going through that shit.
Right.
That are trying to come out the other side and not, to put it lightly, but not kill themselves in the process. That's correct. A lot to fucking deal with.
Yes.
Like I couldn't imagine my daughter being taken away from me, not being able to see them. All those allegations, your reputation being tarnished,
it was so hard. I still have.
You see no way out. Sorry.
There's none. No, I still have my suicide note on my phone. And when times get tough, I read that suicide note. One day I will read it on the air when that time is right. It's pretty dark, but you can see and hear the emotion and the hopelessness that I had, that I was reading to my son and my daughters, and the words that I wanted them to carry on with them. But I was literally taking a permanent solution for a very temporary problem that I could not see the light through. And I can freaking unequivocally, ladies and gentlemen, tell you that it is temporary. It wasn't 6 months. It wasn't a year. It was several years of humiliation, horrible financial issues. But I came out on that other side shining. Now, are there still people out there that I get occasionally, I know what you did. Man, they don't know me.
Yeah.
And the thing is who are they? They don't know you. They have no voice. Yeah. And now they sound stupid because if any of that was even remotely close to being true, because I can honestly tell you, you may not trust the system and you may sit there and go, this system is bullshit. But those investigators have extreme training, and they can read it and they see these cases and they know what is real and what's not. Yeah, I'm sure there are some stuff that slips through the cracks, but that system is flawed in some ways because every system is flawed, but they know what they're doing and they know, and they were able, and they knew it. They could tell. They could see it, and they were like, I'm sorry, we have to go through this process because, you can, and it did get to a point where, the judge, God bless his soul, and, the multiple judges, they're like, one more of these things and you're going to go spend prison time if it comes through. Now, it came to a point where my children are older now. They don't really, they know there was a big court battle. They don't, my youngest or my middle daughter, she has stated, she's like, I don't know, you never did any of that stuff. I don't remember any of that. I don't even, and even my oldest, she admits it. She's admitted to me even now, but I'm not a part of her life. And I spent 6, 7, 8 years fighting. And there came a point now where I said, hey, I have to forgive her for what she did to me, regardless of whether she forgives me.
Yep.
Because forgiveness is not about the other person. No. Forgiveness is about you and your internal being balanced.
It's so interesting you bring that up because I've talked, I don't know how many podcasts I've done, but I think it comes up on everyone, the same topic. Because when everything happened, I ended up hiring a life coach because I'm like, I got to figure this out. I don't know what to do. I'm broken. Right. And one of my biggest struggles was I was like, I don't know how to forget. I don't respect her, so I don't know how to forgive her. And my life coach looked me dead in the eyes and was like, they're not the same thing.
They're not.
But I didn't know, nobody at school teaches you shit like this, And I was like, whoa. And once I started to forgive, I was like, I can forgive her and not respect her. And it's perfectly fine. And then everything shifted. Everything.
dude, it's wild when you have the ability to forgive. Like I don't, when I get emotional, I'm emotional about the child. I'm emotional about my daughters. I'm emotional about my son. I'm not emotional about, like I own it. And I've had to have that. I mean, I remember the last time I spent with my daughters, it came up, why did you cheat on mommy? And that was that moment where it's a gut punch, and I could either deflect it and blame it all on her, or I could own it. And, maybe one day they'll hear this podcast, but I've, and I know it's going to come up one day, but I've kept it from them what their mom did, because I want them to respect their mom, even though I don't believe she's a respectable person. Sure. But that's an opinion.
It's an opinion based off of 16 years ago.
16 years, right. And
people are allowed to change.
Correct. And they are allowed to change. Now, your actions, if you change, have to be reflective of who you are today. So when you sit there and you go, oh, I'm changed, I forgive you, but yet you're still spitting the same narrative that is a lie and a false. Well, I believe my children. It's like, you're going to believe a 3-year-old over an adult, that went through the process, and it was proven through a court of law, through this massive investigation process that was, and for me, the hardest part for me was knowing what my daughter, my oldest daughter, went through, because every time these investigations were underway, she had to go through rape kits.
Jesus Christ.
And when the judge told her that if she reported it one more time, so what then ended up happening was she went to the ER and had doctors who are bound by law to report these things. Then it wasn't her reporting it. Then it was her teachers. And the girls would say things, and the girls are surrounded by it 24/7. So they're being talked through these things, these forensic play therapy sessions, and their mother was coaching her. And she had friends of hers that were telling me what she was doing, but I couldn't tell an investigator that. I even tried at one point. They're like, it doesn't matter. Like, we have to go through this process. And I mean, you're the accused, so we're really not going to listen too much about what you say. We have to go through our own process, which I definitely understand. And, it was horrible. Horrible. Like, it is purely the description of hell on earth going through something like that.
I feel your pain, but I feel there's more, because it's like, again, she had, in my mind, I'm like, there's no regard for the child's well-being here.
No.
Because the poor trauma that child was subjected to just so that she could make you feel pain.
Correct.
Is like, fuck.
Yeah. And the thing is that I don't know where she sits on that spectrum, but the problem is that, I actually don't even know. Like, I don't even know how to, like, I forgive her for it. I still struggle with it a little bit.
Because you're human.
Yeah. And I don't, no amount of ayahuasca or any life coaching or any type of therapy, it'll always be something you struggle with, but it is recoverable. And you have to understand is that once your children get to a certain age they have the ability to make choices. Mm-hmm. You have to let them make those choices. Yep. And again, like we were discussing in part one, consequences can be forever, and or they can not necessarily forever, but have a detrimental impact on your life, even at the age of 13, 14, 15 years old, because, do they want to talk to me right now? No, they don't. Yeah. They moved away. Don't really talk to them, but I have to weigh as a father, do I pursue this and make them more angry and force them to enforce something they don't want? Yeah. Do they want to come to my house? Well, they did for a while, But then when the conversation came up as to why did you cheat on my mom, and, you know, are these things true and false? You're like, well, no, did I abuse your mother? No, I did not abuse your mother. Did you cheat on my mother? Yes, I cheated on your mother. So if you're referencing mental abuse in that sense, and then the lying that I went through, absolutely that is true. And I did. This was a full blown conversation with a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old at the time, or 11-year-old and a 13-year-old when this conversation occurred. And they made the choice that, you know, they didn't want to talk to me because of what I did to their mom. And ladies and gentlemen, if you did something like that, don't be mad at your children, because they're making a choice based on, and that's a consequence for your behavior and your actions.
Correct.
And it's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
It is a very hard pill to swallow, because I don't know if I want to use these terms, but I'll use them for lack of Queen's English, but you are atoning for those sins in that moment, because when you were sleeping with that lady and you were trying to appease whatever it was that you were trying to appease or fulfill, whatever desire it was you were trying to fulfill, you sure shit weren't thinking about them.
Yeah.
Just as much as my ex-wife wasn't thinking about me when she did what she was. Actually, she was thinking about me. She was thinking about keeping her children from the evil man that did all the evil things from her. And she literally Googled what she could do to do that, and she abided by that. I mean, literally, if you Googled, like, how did she planned it out, it worked, and she played the long game, and she, in that sense, she may have won,
but the game's not over.
But the game's not over.
The game's not over.
And I have come to terms with that. That is the other key that you have to remember, guys and girls, is that the game is not over, because we have lives, and if you choose to take a permanent solution for a very temporary problem, you have no idea what's around that corner. My wife currently now had a very mixed raising, and her father, when I met my now wife, he had a very similar story. And my wife's mother, biological mother, was not a very good person. But that man fought for that woman, for my wife, and he never gave up. But at some point, he had to allow her to make her own decisions. And when that time came, my wife literally conjured up this plan, and they basically, and she had an awesome teacher that was like, her situation is way different than my daughter's, but she got her to live with her father. And, you know, my wife's a very strong person, and she's very much so been the grounding element for myself to get through this, and helped me come to that fruition. But regardless, it is still a daily struggle. And, you know, like we were kind of starting to touch on in part one, you know, everything's going great for me. You know, business is good. Got multiple businesses running. Things are going great. You know, things are growing. You'd think everything is hunky-dory. But there's just like these things, these little demons inside of me from, you know, the things that I endured in combat, you know, stuff that was super suppressed that I don't even remember. I know they happened, but I don't remember them because they were so traumatic. And, you know, even with the divorce and the custody battles and all these things that ensued, that now I have such a rich life with my son. Like, I talk to that dude almost every other day. He's got this little cool watch that he calls me, and we talk all the time. And, you know, his mom, you know, he's super excited about this new great event that's about to happen in his life. I don't know if it's a public thing yet, so I'm not going to say it yet. But he's so excited about it, and he privied me, and they privied me to it. So I was so excited. He had to call his stepmom to tell her, and it's so cool. And I'm like so excited, and everything's so great, you know, and you think, wow, man, all this is so good going on in this guy's life. And you see like the Instagrams and all the things that I post, and, you know, but you don't see the night terrors, these sleepless nights. My wife was like, dude, you don't sleep.
Yeah.
Like, you don't, I'm up all night long. And I was like lying to myself. Like, I was like, you know, I don't have a drinking problem. I really don't have a drinking problem, but I wasn't an alcoholic or anything, or a closet alcoholic, but I did drink a little too much. And it's always been something that I'm like, oh, I can stop.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
And it just, all these little things, the night terrors. And then I never had closure with a lot of things in my life. And so I started watching all my buddies going through all of these different ibogaine treatments and ayahuasca, and I started doing research on it, and it started showing like, you know, how this stuff like actually grows neural pathways, and if you have TBIs, you know, traumatic brain injuries, that it can help regrow these pathways and fix things and help bring balance to your life and help you heal from traumatic stress. And I don't care, just because I'm a veteran, and this is part of the reason why I started one of my nonprofits, which was Hunters and Heroes, which we're getting ready to start this podcast and all that. And the premise is hero is not centric to veterans. Hero can be a teacher. Hero could be you. A hero is very subjective, and trauma is subjective. Trauma, just because I was in combat, that doesn't mean that what you endured in your life is any different than what I endured in mine. Watching someone get smoked by a car standing on the corner and you're just going to school, that could be traumatic enough for you to have nightmares for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Assault, all these things.
Yeah.
You know, they're all things. So, you know, these traumatic events, and I saw that at this retreat that I went to, the ayahuasca retreat. And I was so opposed to it. I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing this. No. And then this other gentleman, I think he's a local dude. He has no fallen heroes. He's a former Top Gun pilot. He started a podcast. Dude's phenomenal. Started talking about it, and I've just started following him. And then one of my best friends, he owns CQ Media Group. He went and did it. And I saw his first trip and how much it affected him and changed his life. And I saw other buddies do it, and it changed their lives. And I was like, okay, there's something to this.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he calls me and he's like, let's go. You're going. I was like, all right, well, you know, you seem to rope me into these things, and I don't feel like I have a choice, which I do.
Of course.
You know, and I did it. And, oh, man. And we're starting halfway into this podcast, so it's perfect timing.
Good. Well, I want to preface this too with, it's interesting because I don't want to say I was opposed to it. I always thought it's great for everybody, all that kind of stuff. Scared of it for sure. And then we had our phone call, and I'm like, God damn it. Now I got to do it. You know, it's interesting because it's not that the people that had told me about it, I didn't respect them. There just wasn't a lot of men that I respect telling me about it. Right. It was a lot of females that I respect. Are you saying that you respect me? Well, let's not go that far yet. And you know, but in that,
you raise the bar on me, bro.
Just it's the goal, right?
Yeah, right.
Uplift everybody. And so it wasn't that I like the women that told me about it. I really respected them, but then when you told me in your story, I'm like, God, fuck, shit, got to do it now. I have to do it, and it's definitely scary. So. It's scary because those dark, like even in the life coaching, I went to those dark places, and I'm like, Gugh. Like that's why Dante's Inferno is one of my favorite books.
Oh, that's such a good book.
So good, right?
So good.
Because it describes the terrors when you finally let yourself experience the terrors that you've been suppressing. And it's God damn it. But I have felt, even just again, going through the healing journey, you could call it, that I went on, which was not sitting around and just beating drums, because that drives me nuts, but not neither here nor there.
Ayahuasca will change that.
Yeah, it's the peace you feel when you come out the other side, like Dante's Inferno talks about, when you go to the demon and you figure it out. It's like, whoa. It's so I'm very intrigued. So I don't want to. Let's get into it.
Oh, yeah. So, you know, he gives me this call, and it was literally like a week in advance. And I was like, and I'm honestly at the point, I had done everything, you know, from, you know, never tried weed in my life, started doing weed because I didn't want to get on any type of narcotics, had my finger ripped off in a dog training accident. And, I didn't want to take any oxycodines or anything like that, just due to the suicide attempt and any type of medication that was like that. And I didn't like it. And I think I'm allergic to it because it makes me itch crazy and all that stuff. So, I got into that, and then, and I came off of it. Once I came off the pain, I didn't need it anymore. It helped a little bit with sleep, but then I didn't do it anymore because, I became a pilot and I started flying, and I can't be on that kind of stuff while having an FAA license. And I never did it, but I suffered from not being able to sleep. And so, I went out, and, he invited me out to this retreat, and I'm like, oh, okay, fine. So, got the plane ticket, we went south, and, showed up, and, I'm very much so not this like Mother Earth guy, pagan religion type stuff. And I was like, look, dude, if you start talking about Mother Earth and all this crazy stuff, I'm going to be running the opposite direction. It's just goes against my beliefs and stuff like that. And he's like, no. When I do ask for you to pray, I ask you to pray in your own way. And you pray over your own stuff. So you don't do any of that. And I was like, okay, terrific. That's awesome. So, and dude, the anxiety I had, you see, it was like I was already on a diet. And then when he gave me the heads up, it was actually not a week. It was like maybe 2 weeks. And I immediately had to go on the diet. I do remember that. And I had to go right on to the dieta, is what they call it, or something like that. And it was basically like chicken and rice, water, no stimulants. Coffee was the hardest thing. Took like a little over a week for me to get rid of the migraines, but I felt amazing after I came off all the caffeine, because I was drinking insane amounts of caffeine, like a pot of coffee, straining my coffee with Monster type stuff. Would get halfway to the gym and realize I forgot my car type shit. It was pretty wild. And so I came off all the stimulants, and and I took it serious. My wife was even looking at me like, yeah, I haven't even seen you take a diet seriously in years. And so we showed up, pumped my tent up, got everything going, came over to the little area that we're doing, laid out my mat. He kind of went on to, hey, please stay in the general vicinity. If you go outside, sit in the chairs, but don't wander off. You can look at the sky and stuff like that. I'd read and looked at what everyone was explaining to what I would potentially experience. And they, don't fight it. And boy, let me tell you, don't do that, because if you fight it, you're going to go, it's going to break you, and it's going to put you into a hell loop, which sometimes you need that. I needed that. Okay. And, went into it. Night one, took my, ayahuasca and laid back, really didn't feel much of anything going down. Started watching everybody else, go start on their journey. And I'm like, man, and I was laying there, and he starts to hit the bongo drums, and he starts with like this really beautiful like singing and whistling, and it really starts to calm you down, and you start to kind of like feel what's going on. I'm like, okay, I kind of feel something going on right now, and then it was like, oh shit, here we go. The ground started moving, and I started seeing these wild ass colors, and I'm like, whoa, like this is like intense. And I got a little scared, cause I'd never done any type of psychedelics. And as I was laying there, apparently it was a certain time into the ceremony that he asked for, it's called helper cup, but I wasn't really getting anything out of it. It was just like a lot of beauty. Like it was gorgeous.
So that's what happened. I did mushrooms twice, and that was the experience I had the first time. It was the most beautiful colors and everything I've ever seen in my entire life. It was unbelievable.
God. It was literally, and I took it, and I took that helper cup, and we were off to the races. And I took it, sat back down. I sat on my knees, faced the other direction because I didn't want to look at anyone else. And I was facing this wall. I shut my eyes, and at this point, he was hitting these drums, and they were just, oh God, they were beautiful. It was like literally just, it felt like warm water being poured over me. And when I opened my eyes, I was staring at one of my ranger buddies, and he was in pieces. And we were talking, and he was like, immediately the first words out of his mouth to me were, "Let it go." And I was like, no. And of course now I'm like in hysterical, and I'm like, he's talking to me. Now we're having this argument and he's telling me to go outside. I'm going, no, that's not an answer. I'm asking him why. Like, and this is not like, this was like wild. Like I'm actually getting like emotional shaky because it's so freaking real. Yeah. And I'm asking him why he survived. I didn't, why I wasn't hurt, because I mean, I was sitting inches away from him when he got blown up. And he's like, just go. I'm like, mother effer, like, tell me an answer. It was so typical because he was so like Gandhi type, you know, like always answering a question with a question. So it was very much so him like that. And I went outside, and it was in that moment I saw the universe, and it was quite literally astronomical and out of this world. And I was like, oh my God. And I see it. And in that moment, it was like something reached from the earth and ripped me to the ground. Apparently, like several of the helpers that were there saw it happen. And then it was literally like someone had pulled something out of my soul. And the feeling was light. Like, I won't go into the rest of the experience because it's literally astronomical, and it's something that you have to experience yourself. That is like, we'll talk offline. But that was like one of the most out of this world experiences I ever had in that moment. And when I came out of it, I was completely sober. And I was like, I'm like, what happened? I had like dirt all over my face, rocks all over me, dirt. I'm like, what happened? They're like, well, this is what we saw. And I was like, I was like, and I was realizing, like, I remember everything that occurred. And I was like, that wasn't real, you know? But I felt so amazing. And then I was like, I walked over, you know, a few feet away, I was looking over this beautiful hillside. I could see every star on the horizon. It was like looking through night vision, but like times 10. And I could see every shooting star, every satellite. It was wild. And all of a sudden, you know, I'm sitting there, and now I'm sitting around this fire. There was no fire. I was just in this chair, and I'm sitting with all these dudes that I knew. You know, some had committed suicide, and I was like, got to ask all these questions. You know, why? And they're like, you're doing it. You're living. So
you're still in this trip now.
Oh, I'm still. There was no, it came back on like boom.
Oh, wow. And so it like went off and then boom, right back on.
Right back into it. And
is that normal?
Apparently.
Okay.
Clearly.
Okay.
There's two more nights of this. Okay. So this was just, and it started like at 5 a.m. and then went till about midnight or 1. It didn't quite go like that for me. Cause I was still in it. When the ceremony ended, they had to like help me out of it, cause I got into a hell loop at the end, and it was miserable. Some people purged. I wasn't purging, and I was getting upset about it, and I didn't purge until the very end, and it was horrible. But it was, and I was literally through this process, I was like, I'm not doing this tomorrow. I'm literally going to get on an airplane. I'm flying home, and I'm done. And I'm having all these questions. I'm talking to these dudes. I'm getting closure. I went through my first divorce. I got closure. I asked my kids for forgiveness. I learned about forgiveness. And I'm like, dude, this is crazy. A freaking root and a leaf can give you the tools to get closure, healing, and learn about yourself, but to carry that on. And I didn't understand it until the first day after. So everything happens. I ended up having another hell loop that night involving my grandmother, who wasn't the greatest person in the world to me.
So you were around this fire that wasn't real, and you were talking to all your buddies. What
I was in a desert, and I was not in a desert.
Okay.
I was like in the middle of nowhere down south, and it was, God, I don't know how to describe it. It was the wildest. Everything was, but the sky was real. I knew that was the only thing. And then I had things that I was able to ground myself to realize where I was in the reality. And I was able to get closure because I really like resented my grandmother. But what I ended up realizing was the pain that she went through in her life that made her the way she was. And I didn't know that. And I didn't realize some of the stuff I didn't know about. And I kind of talked to my dad about it afterwards, and I realized kind of what my grandmother had gone through. And it was pretty astronomical because it was something that had never really been divulged to me in the past. And there are things that were reminded to me through this journey that I realized, things that she went through, back in the, early 1900s, like 20s, 30s, whatever it was, her first husband she came home and caught him. He was gay.
Oh my goodness.
And back then, that was that was a big no-no. So they went there saying he was a super prominent attorney. And then she ended up meeting my grandfather, I think during or just after World War II. And then of course my mom came along and all that. But she also had a pretty traumatic childhood and all these other things that she didn't know how to love. And she was very critical and very, very, very mean. And she really jacked my mom up. So it also explained a lot about my mom. And my mom's a wonderful woman, like great woman. She struggles with a lot now in her older age because of that, because she's never handled it. So that all ends. And then I ended up in this, I started fighting it again, and I wanted it to be over, and it wasn't over. So I ended up going into a hell loop. They were able to get me out of it.
Can you explain? I don't know what a hell loop is.
So a hell loop is kind of like you're in hell. There's no other way to describe it like that. It's a very dark place. You can't get out. It's like sometimes it'll present itself as like a hole, and you're in it, and you're stuck. It can be scary because you don't know what's real and what's fake, and you don't know who's real and who's not, and you're seeing things, and you're seeing all kinds of wild things, and there's something to be learned in it, but you're closed off so much at that point that you're not willing to accept it, and it will just eat you up until you let it go. Probably could have gone, but I mean, we're talking 5-ish in the afternoon, evening till midnight, 1, and I'm still like deep in it, and everybody's already off their journey and gone to bed. And at that point, my homie's with me, and I'm just like, please make it. I mean, I had already picked up my bat. I'm like in the middle of this field, and I'm like, get me out of here. So I come out of it.
How did they get you out of it?
I don't honestly know.
Okay.
They dropped some oil under my tongue, and I actually ended up purging. And then as soon as I stopped purging, I was just throwing up.
Yep.
And then I felt great, but then I went back into it. So when you throw up, when you throw up, you go back into this thing. And I was like, he's like, open up your tongue. I was like, like, please just get it. And
pour the whole fucking bottle.
Yeah, whatever he dripped on my tongue, it pulled me out, and I was able to go back to my tent, and I went to sleep, and it was like I was conflicted, and I woke up, and I'm like, fuck. I had this like really bright yellow tent. So when I woke up, it felt like it was like noon. And if anyone who really knows me, I will not wake up before 9 a.m. Like I just haven't done it in years because I can't sleep. I was like 5:30 in the morning, and I felt like I had slept for freaking past like noon, 1 o'clock. I was like, oh my God. So we get done, all this stuff, and we end up going the second night. I was sitting there. We take the ayahuasca, and the ayahuasca, voice clearly is like, you have a problem with empathy and sympathy, and you're going to feel everybody's pain inside this circle tonight. And I was like, please be gentle. I was like, and I did. I felt I was angry. I went through all the emotions. And then by the end of halfway through the night, it was like everything was going good. And I started like seeing these things that I needed to work on. And I was able to understand people's journeys and forgiveness. And that was the big thing for that night. And so it was every night there was this new thing. And then, but leading up to that night, I was like, all right, I kind of want to know. Because when I woke up that next morning, let me digress a little. I felt so light, astronomically light. It was insane. I felt so good. I was so happy. And I was like, man, that was a terrible experience last night. And then we went into this second night where I talked to some people, had some more closures and stuff like that. And then the third night, it was like I woke up the next morning and I was even lighter. And so now we're on day 3. And I really truly believe it's a 3-day event, should be a 3-day event. And, and before we started every day, we wrote her name down. We wrote down what we wanted to work on in that session. And, my first night was like closure and peace. Boy, did I get that. Second night, I can't remember what I wrote down, but I remember it didn't get anything I wanted. It was like what I needed, right? And the third night, I wanted clarity and I wanted direction. And I was crying. I was in pure heaven the whole night. I got direction. Business-wise, I got direction, and I was just blown. Excuse me. I was blown away at how clear everything was. And I was like, it was like ending, and I was like crying. I didn't want it to end. Yeah. I wanted to keep going and get into it.
That's how I felt the first time I did mushrooms. Not to do the same thing, but that's how I felt the first time. I didn't want it to end.
Oh no!
It was
and
I
started talking to the gentleman that was doing this retreat, and he's like, this has been a 2,000-year tradition, and there's different variations of ayahuasca all over the world, to include in Christianity, and that have the same similar results in many different religions. And we've lost this tradition because before people went to war, they did it. When they came back from war, they did it. Before they got married, they did it. When they were about to have children, they did it. When they were taking chieftain and leadership roles, they did it. It has been lost, and I believe that if I don't care who you are, I think every single human being on this planet, and unfortunately there's not enough out there for people to partake in this, but it was something that is so life-changing that I am up, boom, every morning. I'm only about a week and a half removed from this, whatever I'm at right now. But my wife was like, holy moly, you actually listen to me now. Like, I'm focused on her, But I'm exhausted by the end of the night because I'm so intently focused on what others have to say. Wow. Where before I was so all over the radar. I'm like thinking about the next thing I'm going to say. Yeah. No ability to focus. Going into work, I got to do this. I got to get this podcast, whatever. I got to do this. I got to talk to this client. I got this thing going on. So many things on my plate. And I had zero focus, and I was really not as productive as I could be. And now I'm able to go, okay, we got this. Things becoming chaotic in my house. And I'm like, hey, it's all right. Hey, Sophia, you spilled your milk everywhere. It's spilt milk. Let's get through this. Instead of being like, oh, makes you want to kill a fat kid, like, what's his name? Kick a fat kid, whatever his saying was. But, it was literally like that, for a while. And then now it's like, all right, we're all right, man. And I think Joe Rogan was like, in one of his podcasts, someone showed me when I came back, and he said, everyone should do this. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, and I've never really got too deep into this, and now I'm like really like researching it, and I'm like, this stuff needs to be legalized here and accessible for these, for especially for our veterans, number one, our first responders, and really anyone who's been through any type of major trauma. And we've all been through trauma because I'm sorry, but we're
humans.
Yeah. We're not privy.
Part of the experience.
Yeah. You hear PTSD and everyone goes, oh, veteran, it's not that. I mean, you got women out there who've been raped. You have women who've been sexually assaulted. You have women who are married to me, that I highly suggest you go and do this because this is something that it heals you from the inside out, and it gives you the tools to continue on with life and be a better husband, be a better father, be a better leader, be a better businessman. And it gives you these blinders that, did it make me less spiritual in the way I believe in my Father in heaven? No. Right. Not at all. Actually, it made me more connected to him than ever.
Well, it's actually interesting. I was on a podcast, and there's a book called, I didn't finish all of it because it's huge. Yeah, I believe it's called The Immortality Key, The Religion with No Name. And it talks all about this and how through Greece and everything to find God, they used these things. Yeah. This was part of the experience of it. So it doesn't actually make you less spiritual. It makes you more connected.
Oh, absolutely. I asked at one point when I was sitting out in those chairs one night, and I was like, God, can I see heaven? And I looked up, and it was like a zipper that went across the sky, and it opened, and I was like, oh, and it was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. I saw heaven, and it slapped shut, bam, and a loud thunder. And I like looked around, and I was like, and I kind of got scared, and I was like, I'm going crazy. Like, this is crazy. And clear as you are talking to me right now, it was like, if you don't follow my laws and regulations, you're like not coming here. And I was like, and I immediately became terrified. And it was like that clear, like you. And I was like, oh my God, you know, like, I need to go to church. Like,
so I mean,
now.
it's funny because it's like when I think about these things, it's the same with like my dad was talking about like legalizing weed, and he was like, well, when was the last time someone was high and they were like, I'm gonna kick the shit out of you? He's like, that doesn't happen when people smoke weed. It only happens when people drink. He's like, and so,
that's legal.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because it's like, okay, the worst thing that happens to you is you want to live better because, and this is for people that may not believe in God or religion or whatever, but if it has the effect that it makes you just want to live clearer as a human being and better to create more goodness in the world,
right?
Well, maybe we should just all fucking try it.
Yeah.
Because what's the harm of more good?
Yeah. I mean, these people have 2,000 years of experience in this, and they have zero negative responses to this.
That's what I'm saying. Like nobody has done it and been like, I'm going to become Hitler.
Or they go, oh man, so sorry. He took it and died. That's never happened.
Right.
You know, everybody's come out on the other side, and everybody that I was there with, and I don't remember how many people it was in astronomically, and I use that word very, very specifically. Some people laugh because I use it a lot, but very, very specifically because it was so life-changing in regards to their life. And I highly suggest every one of you out there listening, find somebody, do it, and it will make you a better person. I promise.
Yeah. If we have 2 minutes, I want to see if we can get this story. And if you're okay with telling it, the story about that you told me, where you had to take your canteen and pour it on. So you okay with telling that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So
we can fit into 2 minutes.
Yes.
It's wild.
So part of the things that I had a problem with was traumatic events that were suppressed. And one of the things that happened was we were doing what was called a soft knock. That's where you go on a door, you knock on the door and say, hey, bad guy, come out. We're going to arrest you. And I was like, this is it was ridiculous back in the day, but that's what we did at one point. And I was pulling security. There was a child care center across the street, and this is in Iraq. And a gentleman in a puffy jacket in the middle of the desert walks into this place. And I saw it, and I was like, man, that guy looks like a bad actor, but I did nothing about it. He walks into this child care center and literally holds his hand up, screams Allah Akbar, and blows himself up in this child care center. And I literally watched with my own two eyes, people just coming apart. And for obvious reasons, this has been suppressed. I hadn't remembered this. You know, I remember every radio call, everywhere everybody was. And I was standing behind cover, so when it blew, I went under. And when I came back up, you know, buildings were on fire, cars were on fire in front of it. This child runs out of this building, no clothes, no hair, clearly burned off, and his flesh was on fire. God. And I literally took my canteen to put him out, and I picked him up, and his skin sloughed off. And in that moment, he, in perfect English, said, "Save me," and took his last breath. And don't you do that. You're going to make me do that. And
that's what got me last time.
Yeah.
That's why I held slowed for 50 months.
And it was suppressed for the better part of 20 years. And it came back. And in my retreat, I relived that. I relived my entire military career and everything in my life in just a few hours. And that was probably one of the most traumatic events in my life. There was a lot of them, but that was probably the most severe. And in that moment, the child became beautiful and completely, its hair was there. The whole 9 yards was there. And it looked at me and he said, "It's okay." He looked at me and he said, "It's okay. Let me go. Let me go." And I was like, and I said, "Why?" And this was the first night. This was the very first night. And I was like, how do I let this go? How? And he goes, "You just do." And I mean, and he had the accent, he had the whole 9 yards. And I'm looking around and it was just chaos and pandemonium. And I was like, and that moment, and then I just like, it was like teleportation. You know, the best way that I can describe all of this was like almost like the Christmas story when they're taking Scrooge to all these different Christmas past and his future and his past and all these things. And it was like that, but so real. And I'm awake as you are here. Now I probably look weird and all this other stuff, but dealing with that. And it's a story I've never been able to talk about ever. It's a story that I've never been able to, like even engage. There's other events, but like all of my events, like I get more emotional about seeing other people's reactions than I do the actual story now, because there are things even with my story that I get emotional about, but now I'm able to control that. And, you know, and again, this is another piece that it was able to give you those tools to be able to control those emotions and get through all of that and process something so traumatic in your life. Was it easy? Oh, hell to hell no.
Sure.
I was had to relive it.
Yeah.
You know, but you have to go through it to get to the other side.
Yeah. Well,
and I'm better for it.
So as I said, the first one, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for this country. And I mean, I continue to learn from you now, and it's going to be amazing. And we're going to go do that together. It's going to be fun, man. Thank you so much for your rawness and your honesty. And I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot of stuff from this, man. I can't thank you enough for all of this.
The number one thing that I want one of you out there to remember, and I'll get emotional saying this, is don't take the permanent solution for a temporary problem. Because I promise, no matter how hard, whatever it is, financial, divorce, fatherhood, loss, whatever it is, it gets easier, it gets better. Maybe not in the moment, but don't choose something because you're more wanted than you are gone. I promise you, your loss that you're going to bestow on other people is going to be greater than anything that you're going to endure in that choice. Like if you think you're going to have peace, you're going to leave everybody else with a lot of pain.
Yeah.
It's very selfish, and I don't want you to do it, and neither does anyone else. And you guys can find me on Instagram. I'm more than happy to help you, but don't ever make that choice.
We'll tag all your Instagrams. You guys are welcome to reach out to me anytime also.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this, brother. It was
Always.
amazing. It was amazing.